Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're uncovering how two absolute giants of history, with deeply, fundamentally contrasting philosophies, shaped the very foundation of modern India. We are, of course, talking about Mahatma Gandhi and Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. Both are celebrated worldwide as architects of the nation, and yet their blueprints for what that nation should actually look like were intensely debated. So, let's dive right in. How exactly did two leaders with such clashing visions manage to build the world's largest democracy? It's really easy to look back at history and imagine a smooth, unified path to independence. But the reality? It was a massive battle of ideas. How do you construct a democratic state when the very leaders leading the charge have totally different priorities for the society they're trying to build? Here is our roadmap for today. We're going to cover 1. Two architects, one nation. 2. Gandhi's vision of harmony. 3. Ambedkar's fight for justice. 4. The roots of inequality. And finally, 5. A shared constitutional legacy. Starting with Section 1. Two architects, one nation. Forging a post-colonial future. You see, both of these leaders shared one massive, historic goal: building a free India. But uniting the Indian subcontinent was incredibly complex. We aren't just talking about a unified bloc of people all pushing back against British colonial rule together. We're talking about a highly diverse, deeply stratified society locked into rigid class and caste systems. True national integration meant getting all of these disparate, often conflicting groups onto the exact same page. And to achieve true freedom, Gandhi and Ambedkar believed they needed entirely different roadmaps. Moving to Section 2, Gandhi's vision of harmony. Ethics, education, and equality. Now, what's really fascinating here is that Gandhi saw religion not as a dividing factor, but as the ultimate glue, an unbreakable bond of unity. He firmly believed that equal respect for all faiths wouldn't just patch over religious rifts, it would actively bring people together. He thought that because the scriptures of all religions fundamentally point toward goodwill and understanding, bridging the gulf between different communities was the absolutely essential first step for national integration. He looked at society through an intensely moral lens, famously warning against these 7 social sins. He believed that engaging in politics without principles, wealth without work, or commerce without morality would just rot a nation from the inside out. He also warned against education without character, pleasure without conscience, science without humanity, and worship without sacrifice. For Gandhi, a nation built on this kind of ethical foundation, one that actively avoided these specific pitfalls, could withstand any attack. He believed unity had to be built from the ground up, brick by moral brick. And this framework didn't just stay in India, it spread like wildfire. Gandhi's universalization of ethics exported the tools of civil liberty to the rest of the globe. By proving that truth and nonviolence could actually be applied to global affairs and not just individual behavior, his methods later influenced monumental figures, like Nelson Mandela in South Africa, changing the course of history far beyond his own country's borders. Which brings us to Section 3, Ambedkar's fight for justice, dismantling the caste system. Now, in sharp contrast to Gandhi's focus on overarching moral harmony, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar brought a fiercely analytical approach, driven by an absolute demand for immediate social justice. To really understand Ambedkar, you have to look at what he actually lived through. Imagine earning advanced degrees from Columbia University and the University of London in the 1910s, only to return to India and face severe systemic discrimination. Upper caste subordinates in the Baroda government and later his own academic colleagues at Bombay University humiliated him to the point where he was forced to resign, twice. This stark contrast between his world-class intellect and the mistreatment he endured directly fueled his revolutionary political movement from 1924 onwards, fighting for the rights of the Dalits, or untouchables. His entire aim is perfectly captured in the single quote: justice for the last, the lost, and the least. Ambedkar fundamentally believed that if you didn't ensure improved living conditions, access to education, and adequate government representation for the lowest castes, then freedom from the British was literally just an illusion. Let's look at Section 4, the roots of inequality, challenging the social order. To dismantle the caste system, Ambedkar didn't just organize political protests, he hit the archives. He published rigorous historical and ethnographic research to challenge the very foundations of the Hindu social order. For example, in his highly influential book, Who Were the Shudras?, he hypothesized a fascinating 3-step process. He argued that the Shudras were not originally a separate lower caste at all, but actually belonged to the Kshatriya, or warrior caste. According to his research, after a power struggle with the Brahmins, they were manipulated, deprived of the sacred thread, and artificially degraded in their social position. He used this to prove that their low status wasn't some natural occurrence, but the direct result of deliberate historical manipulation. And he applied that same sharp investigative lens to the concept of untouchability. He used ethnographic evidence to argue that untouchables had no distinct racial, ethnic, or occupational origin. Instead, he hypothesized that they were originally Buddhists. As the Hindu upper castes, led by the Brahmins, sought to stop the spread of Buddhist influence, these specific individuals were pushed into a corner, isolated, and permanently branded as untouchables. So here is where we hit the crux of the debate, the profound philosophical divide. Gandhi and the Congress Party believed they needed to achieve political reform and independence from British colonial rule first and foremost. Ambedkar, however, insisted no, achieving social justice and the complete annihilation of the caste system absolutely has to come first. Why? Because Ambedkar strongly believed that a Western-style democracy would just empower the upper castes to dominate the parliament and the judiciary, keeping the lower castes exactly where they were, unless social equality was legally established from day one. To ensure his vision wouldn't be ignored, Ambedkar fought his entire life to secure constitutional safeguards for the lower castes. He published incredibly detailed, often scathing works, books like Annihilation of Caste, Who Were the Shudras, and, pointedly, What Congress and Gandhi Have Done to the Untouchables. These were meticulously researched attacks on both the exploitative nature of the caste system and Gandhi's specific approach to solving it. Finally, Section 5. A shared constitutional legacy, synthesizing two visions. Now, here is the historical twist that I absolutely love, and it's the main takeaway here. Despite Ambedkar's severe, very public, and scathing critiques of Gandhi's approach, it was actually Gandhi who suggested Ambedkar's name to head the committee to draft the Indian Constitution. Gandhi recognized Ambedkar's sheer legal brilliance and his unyielding commitment to the marginalized. In an ultimate act of prioritizing the nation's future over any personal or political rivalry, Gandhi recommended his greatest critic to be the primary architect of India's highest law. As we look at their intertwined legacy today, it leaves us with a massive critical question to ponder. In the modern pursuit of a perfect society, which must come first, political unity or the absolute dismantling of social inequality? Both leaders brought indispensable tools to the building of the world's largest democracy. Without Gandhi's unifying moral framework, the massive mobilization against colonial rule might never have held together. But without Ambedkar's relentless legal fight, millions might have been left behind in the newly formed republic. It really is a question of how we prioritize justice and harmony in our own world today. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep exploring these incredible moments in history.